Hey guys, this is Josh, and in this video I'm going to be covering two of the big problems with regular currencies, with fiat currencies. And those two things are centralization and inflation. Again, this is a very kind of technical presentation, but it's going to give you the background knowledge you need to understand why traditional currencies aren't as good as cryptocurrencies. So let's just jump right into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is centralization with banks. So big banks like Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, and Citibank um, all act as middlemen between any two people trying to do a transaction that isn't a cash deal. If you're sending money with PayPal, if you're sending it with a wire transfer, or if you're doing a deposit in someone else's account, it's all done through a bank because someone needs to verify that one person has enough money to send to another individual and make sure that person can also receive it. So they act as middlemen to transfer money from one person to another. Now they're also private institutions, which means that they are companies trying to make profit as well. They're some of the biggest companies in the entire world, and there's a couple problems with banks being the central authority in all these transactions. One is time. A wire transfer, for example, can take up to 3 days. If you want to do a deal in business on one day, and you do a wire transfer, it takes several days, plus it's expensive. They're going to charge you fees. So there are some issues associated with these centralized authorities taking care of your money and kind of avoiding those peer-to-peer transactions. So what I have here to kind of illustrate an example is this picture. You can kind of imagine this blue ball here as a bank, and all these other silver ones are people trying to transact with each other. And so I have an example here. What you could count as an entry in a bank's spreadsheet for a transaction. Let's say that we're going to send 1,000 US dollars from Sally's checking account to Jim's savings account. And the bank would essentially update their ledger or their database. It's just like a database, any SQL or Excel database. That's their ledger. They're going to charge Sally 3%, which is 30 USD. 3% of $1,000 is $30. And all they're going to do is they're going to update Sally's checking account ledger and subtract $1,030 from it. And they're going to send Jim $1,000 to his savings account. And send is actually the wrong word, and I'll show you why in a second. But the point is here that the bank made $30 off this transaction. And when I show you what really happened, you're going to see that this $30 is all profit and very easily made, and that's why banks are some of the biggest companies in the entire world. Because there is no sending money. The money isn't real, and it's not being sent from one place to another. It's just an update in a database. So the best example I have is right here. This would be a spreadsheet in a bank's database, for example. And one here, this first entry, is the bank's account. And I just kind of put a check mark here for both checkings and savings. It's kind of the value of the bank. Now we have Jim's saving account with $10,000 in it, Jim's checking account with $2,500 in it, Sally's savings with $11,000, and Sally's checkings with $5,000. So when I say that the bank sends Sally's money to Jim, again, that never happens because there isn't actually any money being transferred. All that happens is the bank updates their database. You can see here what they did is they went into their database, their spreadsheet, and they said, okay, Sally, we're just going to cross out your 5,000, and now you have 3,970, which is just $1,030 less. All they did was just change a value in a spreadsheet. And then they update Jim's savings account here. It goes from 10,000 to 11,000, and then the bank can update their own spreadsheet for their own values, and now they have an extra $30 in this case. So the $30 the bank made just by changing some numbers in their spreadsheets shows you why banks are so profitable and make so much money. And the only reason they're able to do this is because they have so much money, and they're able to act as an authority that can check these values and make sure one person has money to send to someone else. We'll talk about how blockchain fixes that problem later and removes the central authority. But the point is that if there was no central authority here, Jim might not know that Sally actually has the money to send him. Now we're going to talk about centralization with the Federal Reserve. This is another issue that comes up a lot. So there's several reserves for each country. In the case of the US, it's the Federal Reserve, and they do 5 main things. Number one is they conduct the nation's monetary policy to promote maximum employment, stable prices, and moderate long-term interest rates in the U.S. economy. And this is straight from the Federal Reserve's website. But what essentially this means is that they just, again, conduct the nation's monetary policy. They need to make sure that the U.S. dollar doesn't lose all of its value. And that's really the goal of any single reserve in any country, is to make sure the dollar doesn't fail. The other one is to promote the stability of the financial system and seek to minimize and contain systemic risk. A systemic risk is just the fail of the financial system in any given country. So they want to keep the financial system alive. Number 3 is promote the safety and soundness of individual financial institutions and monitor their impact on the financial system as a whole. This one's a bit tricky because you can see here they are trying to promote the safety and soundness of individual financial institutions. They're trying to make sure banks, as private institutions and profitable companies, stay alive. So this kind of goes along with the bailouts in the 2008 collapse, where the Federal Reserve can take action to bail out these huge companies that are making greedy decisions. Number 4 is to foster payment and settlement system safety and efficiency through services to the banking industry. Again, the banking industry and the U.S. government. The two work together and are both very profitable ventures. Number 5 is promoting consumer protection and community development. That one just talks about how they want to make sure the end consumer in the U.S. economy is safe. This brings me to the point of what the Federal Reserve really does, which is they manage and print our currency, our fiat currency, which we talked about in an earlier lesson. And I wanted to show here the inverse relationship between purchasing power, which we talked about in the last lesson, and the quantity of the currency in circulation. So you can see we have 2 graphs here. One is the graph of the purchasing power going down. The other is that currency in circulation going up. And I'll show you the math on this in a second, why this happens. Why, when you print more currency, this red line here, the purchasing power drops so drastically. And this is called inflation, and it's happened in pretty much every currency in the entire world. And the US dollar and the Canadian and the Great British Pound are no exception. So to illustrate this the best way I can, let's say if we go back to the old days and we take all of Earth's value and we say that every good and service on Earth at any given time is collectively worth the same as all the gold on Earth. Remember from the last lesson, gold doesn't actually have any real value, only an intrinsic value, because we assign it to the value of other things and use it as a currency or a money. So let's say that all 165,000 metric tons of gold that are on planet Earth are equal to all the value on planet Earth. And then we have our currency, our USD fiat, and we say that $1 million, and I know it's not the case, but it's just for simplicity's sake, $1 million is worth all the gold in the world, or all the gold in the world is worth $1 million, vice versa. All 3 of these things equal each other in terms of quote-unquote value. So what we can say here is we can just find out what's the price per ton of gold in US dollars. I did the math here, and if this was the case, then each ton of gold would be worth $6,060. And likewise, 1/165,000th of the Earth's value would also be worth $6,060. The truth is that the number is much bigger, but again, it's for simplicity's sake. Now, the Federal Reserve can print more money. So if we add another $1 million to this pool of money, we do the math again, and now 1 ton of gold is worth $12,121. Don't be fooled. The value of the gold did not go up. What happened was the US dollar became weaker. The gold's worth the same thing because you can't make more gold. It's a limited supply, but you can print as much money as you want. And when you print more and you do this math, it looks like the value of gold went up, but it's just the value of the dollar went down. Let's do this again for the 3rd time. If we have $3 million now, the price goes to $18,000. And if you keep pumping more and more money into the economy, prices will raise for this exact reason because the purchasing power goes down, and that's called inflation. One of the greatest examples of inflation ever, considered hyperinflation, was in Zimbabwe. What I have here is a picture of a $100 trillion note, and that probably couldn't buy you a piece of bread in Zimbabwe because there was so much money in circulation, so much currency, probably hundreds of millions of billions of trillions of dollars were printed, that the value of that currency was probably less than what it's worth to just burn it. So that's hyperinflation. This happens through a lot of currencies in history. Over 100 currencies have died and gone to zero because of hyperinflation. So I hope that that explained inflation and centralization pretty well and why both are problems. And I'll show you in another video how cryptocurrencies actually solve that problem. And what I have for you again are some more resources that I'll link down below. One is that the Federal Reserve actually profited $100 billion as a private institution last year that is independent from the US government, which I've also linked here. And then just some more information on Zimbabwe's hyperinflation if you want to learn more about it.